Hello, Internet, and welcome to Only Lovers Book Club, where I get together with my fellow Golden Girls and we read romance and erotica sometimes. And we get together and we talk about it. So we take turns, and for the month of April, it was my pick, and I decided to choose the first graphic novel that we're reading that we've ever read. And like, I'm surprised it took me this long to pick something. However, here it is. It's Smut Peddler Silver seasoned, for more seasoned kind of love. So this is a publisher's Iron Circus Comics. And mostly they've done their printings using Kickstarter. So anytime like they had, and I have all of the Smut Peddlers. I think I started with My Monster Boyfriend, and then I don't remember what came after that. My Monster Boyfriend,
You have a robot one, right?
Sex Machine. I actually have that one here. The others are back in Puerto Rico. But every time one came out, I love this like holographic cover. Every time one came out, I had to have it. I had to buy it, and sorted past because of the supply chain situation. It has not arrived, but I have the PDF. And so, yeah, I decided I wanted to choose Silver for us to read. I don't regret it. And so let me read to you what it's about, and then we can begin. The Smut Peddler series of erotic anthologies is back again, and this time it's all about mature love. This collection offers 14 tales of May December romance, silver foxes, and sophistication, aging gracefully together, and sexy nights with steel haired sweeties. We've been at this a long time, and trust us, a little experience makes all the difference. So that's what it says on the back of the anthology. And I honestly love this cover. I love all the silver and bronze and gold. But I really love this person who I'm assuming is just, either me or, anybody looking fantastic in their oldies. And then Jeff Goldblum. Like, that's my picture. And so, because sometimes reading anthologies, I think, is a little bit difficult to do for book club, is I prefer reading anthologies if I can just like pick up the book, flip through, pick something, put it back down. And so that can be a little tedious when you have to read so many. And I think that that's why we haven't had a lot of luck reading anthologies
I
before.
will say this is my favorite anthology, surprisingly enough, that we've read in book club. Because you're right, it's the first comic one, but we've read other anthologies or attempted to. Okay, this is also the only anthology I've read straight through for book club and not skipped any stories.
Exactly. So we had that Pets in Space one at one point.
Yeah.
There was a couple.
I would count that Choose Your Own Adventure one as kind of an anthology too.
I think Pets in Space I did not read.
I didn't read all of them.
We only read like one story.
No, we couldn't get through it. It just wasn't our jam. And
Yeah.
Even though Pets in Space sounds
awesome, but I don't know, it didn't work, and it was too much of a slog to make it through all of the stories. So I was nervous about picking this, but I also knew, yes, it was going to be graphic novels, so it wouldn't be super hard to get through. But also, I devised this handy dandy interactive activity. So I created a presentation on Canva for all of us to download and to go rating stories as we read them, so that we could, decide which ones were our ultimate favorites, and we could remember them all. So you could take notes, and then you could rate them on story, art, and spicy factor. So, you could give it 5 stars if it was incredible, and then you yourselves average out what were your favorites, what were your least favorites, and what worked for you and what didn't. So we can talk about all of those things. So yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, like now I kind of want to do more of that. Like I'm not a person who usually takes notes as I go, but that was so much fun. I loved like rating it, and I love being able to write my comments and thinking about them in those 3 different ways. Like it really worked for me. I really like the Canva slides.
Oh my goodness. Okay, cool. So maybe I don't know. I don't know if it'll work because we don't do art for like every single one, but maybe we'll devise some sort of rating system like as we go. Who knows? We'll see. The reason that I decided for this one, I think it was a group effort. I was like, which one would you like to read? But I was hoping we would read this one because I just don't have a lot of like erotica that includes people over 50 years old. And I think that that's interesting. I kind of want to get into it and I want to know your guys' overall impressions. Drea can go first because Drea's wearing a fantastic wig for today's hangout. If you're just listening, she's wearing this long, like covered the boobs type gray hair and a vintage long sleeve dress. I don't know. Tasha, you can add notes, things that I'm missing. I don't know fashion, but if I miss any descriptors, please insert here.
I think you captured it. It's a long, flowing, curly silver wig atop a vintage floral pattern, flattering cut dress.
Yeah, it is very good, and
It is, and this is from Azucena Vintage on Instagram. I wore it in my latest reel too.
But then you were referencing your younger you.
Oh,
so this is older. You've come full circle. Oh my god.
Full circle.
I didn't wear anything like costume wise for the hangout, but I tried to wear like all of my like horny pins, so I put like stay horny from and yes, yes, yes from EXO Afterglow. This is a D20 pin that says suck it. Lots of sucking happened in this anthology. And then I have one that's a book. It's called Book of Smut, which is so pretty. And bookmarked, as you can see. So I thought it was appropriate. When I said we're reading a erotic comic book, erotic graphic novel anthology, what was your what did you think was going to happen and what were your impressions after reading?
Okay, I'll be honest. My first reaction was like, great. Now, instead of just reading about the liquids, I'm going to have to see the liquids. And I did. I did see a lot of liquids in this book. But it did pleasantly surprise me. If you've been following us for a while, you know that I am not really team smut. I'm here for more of like the story and the characters and oftentimes in book selections made by certain book club members, I skip a lot of the sex scenes. But I was very, very pleasantly surprised. I really I genuinely liked several of the stories. Like this wasn't one of those anthologies where I'm like, ooh, that one story was great. And then the others were all like, blah. Like, no, like I had some favorites, but like there were also some like solid ones in there too. There were very few that I flat out didn't like. And I think honestly that comes down a lot to the editing that went into this. Like they picked really good artists and really good writers. So I think the anthology editors just did a really good job of just bringing it all together. Like I was really into a lot of the art. I was really into a lot of the stories, and they were all very, very short. Which helped, I think, get through it very quickly. And there weren't like too many stories. So it's not like you're reading 50 stories and by the end you won't remember a single one. There weren't like that many. And I think Chris's classification, slides really made it extra engaging for me. But yeah, I was not thrilled about this when Chris first brought it up. I wasn't thrilled about any of the Smut Peddler options. I was just like, whatever we read. But I'm really glad we went with this one because, yeah, I don't think same as what Chris was saying. Like, I don't think I've read a lot of romance that's over 50 or honestly, even like over like 35. Like, I feel like that's kind of like the cutting off-ish age for most of the romances we read in book club, where it's like they're either really young or they're in their 30s, and kind of like young professionals or whatever, like us. But yeah, sorry, I rambled on for a while. But I did really like it, and I wasn't expecting to like it that much.
That's nice to hear. What about you, Tosh? What did you think was gonna happen, and what ended up being your impressions after reading the anthology?
I don't know that I really had any specific expectations just because I don't read graphic novels that often. Like I used to be super into manga, but like that was in the past. Um I've seen the Smut Peddlers before because I'd like seen them at your house and had like browsed through them. So I understood what they were.
Yeah, they're just in the living room for like anyone to peruse.
Hanging out, I'd be like watching TV and I'd glance at the bookshelf and be like, what's that? Sex robot. What's going on? What is this? But I didn't really have any expectations just because I didn't know what like the parameters for the stories were going to be or like what the because I had no pre-existing understanding of what was going to be in this, then I just kind of was like, all right, let's read through and see. And there were some stories I thought were super cute and some drawing styles that I really liked, and there were one or two that I was like, yeah, okay, this is fine, like that I wasn't necessarily super impressed by. But I appreciate anthologies because it really is just kind of like pa lo gusto los colores, like there's a little bit of something for everybody. And I think that that's, there's a lot of value in that kind of content just because there's less chance of people just like not finding something that they're into and feeling like they aren't being catered to, or like their specific preferences aren't being reflected in some form of medium. But no, I thought it was fun. I liked that it was super easy to read through. I think I read it in like, I think I split it between like 2 or 3 days just because I was at home with my family. And so I kind of had to like wait for people to not be near me because I was like reading it on my phone too, which kind of sucks because I definitely didn't get the full impact of like the quality of the illustrations. I think if this had been in an actual book, it would have been like really nice to look at the different art styles. So I kind of just, got like a fraction of whatever the experience would have been just based on what I had access to at the time. But it was fun. It was like a fun little thing to dip my toe into while I was like surviving my adventures in Puerto Rico. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's cute. It's always like I think it would be a fun like gift to give somebody if you have a friend who is like into um like being open about sex and is like open to this kind of stuff. I think it's like a fun little, not like a coffee table book, but like if you have a party and you have people coming over, I think it is like a conversation starter if you have some of these in the table, because
Like
that's
if
kind of
you're like me and you have all of them, just like have them spread out on the table.
yeah, just
Choose
like
your own adventure.
Easter egged throughout the apartment, just like spread among things. But no, I thought it was fun. I thought it was cute.
En la canastita en el baño.
Yeah, yeah. People just take a really long time to use your bathroom.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that you guys enjoyed it. I knew I was taking a risk, you know? I always feel like I'm taking a risk when it's something that I really like. And I don't want to hear any pushback, you know, but also I just know like I know what your preferences are, so I just want to make sure that we can at least find some common ground as opposed to like I hate this, but you know, whatever. We read the Fourth Horseman book and I feel like we all just grew, you know, in general.
It's definitely not the kind of thing that I like actively seek out. It's not like I'm Googling like, oh, older people plus erotica plus novels. Like I'm not out there looking for it. Like I said, I watch a lot of Lifetime, Shonda Rhimesy. Like I'm all for people hooking up.
Like when you walk into a used bookstore
Mm-hmm.
or when you walk into a Barnes and Noble and you're just like perusing the romance aisles, there's definitely like a certain age that is most prominent on book covers.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm in my mid 30s, like 34. So I find also Like I find myself, my demographics changing too. Like for example, I read these books by Ursula Vernon, also known as T. Kingfisher, and it's this one that I had mentioned before, like the Paladin series. All of these characters are like in their 30s and 40s. As you know, I thought the premise was cool, but like the reason I bought the books was because I'm like, fuck yeah, give me some old people, fuck it. Just very excited. And I'm like, I find that I have like maybe a little less patience for early mid 20s shenanigans. I just maybe just am not that into it, you know? I think that one of the things that this anthology did for me was that it really was like very affirming as someone who at one point didn't think that they were going to grow to an older age, kind of like aspire to be an older queer person that still has, you know, fulfilling relationships, fulfilling sexual relationships. And it's good to, for me at least, to see those things. And sometimes I get turned off by mainstream media when they depict like older people because of the reaction of the other people. Like I wish it would just be cool. I wish it would just be chill with everybody, you know?
Yeah.
And in some cases, like in Grace and Frankie, it's not always like ew all the time. Like the other characters, you know, get into it, you know, they get with the program. But I think that I wish that still wasn't the knee-jerk reaction. So I do appreciate this anthology for that. I'm sure other things will come up as we're discussing, but I really just kind of want to talk about, you know, what were your favorite stories? Like what stories got the best ratings for you overall? And you can mention as many as you like. It's fine.
I mean, I definitely had one that was like the all-time winner, above them all, like no contest. It was one of those things, like I know you guys get like mad when I like read a book and I'm like, this is gonna win this award at the end of the year, and you're like, you don't know that. It was kind of like that in this book. This was like story number 3, and I read it and I literally wrote in the comments, my favorite forever, in all caps, because I just knew that no other story would. Yes, The Chore.
The Chore.
I mean, listen, give me like mountain man with a farm who does like taxidermy with like animals that he finds. I mean, I was hooked from the start, and I thought that their like sex scenes were like super spicy. The art was also my favorite art. So really all of it. It had my favorite story, my favorite art, and my favorite like spicy scenes all in one. And so yeah, there were many that I liked, but that was just the number 1 star. I would have read that whole novel if it was a novel.
That was really cute. I loved the art in that one. This is The Chore by Reaper Sun. I agree with you that The Chore was it's just it has it all. And if you haven't like if you
I would have picked that book for Only Lovers book club.
There's extra art like at the end of the book, like you can see like extra art of them here. And yeah, no, I'm down for a really my favorite thing is when in the story when they're like, ah, my knee, like, oh, don't you dare break my hip doing that.
Yeah, they were just like, you know, like opposite kind of in every way, and I just love that, you know. That was great. I would have read way more.
Okay.
I'm gonna look up the author to see like what else they have.
What else they got going on? Maybe they have maybe they have their own webcomic, or they have like a spicy Twitter account, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
I gave 5 stars to a couple on like the story level. So I think my top stories ended up being A Pinch of Rosemary, because that one was just like really sweet. And I like
I'm not gonna lie, Drea's like cosplay right now is giving me A Pinch of Rosemary vibes. Like you look like someone from that story.
Yeah, like I'm just making a little food and the neighbor comes in and they're so friendly, and like I just thought the design and the tone of it was like really fun and really sweet. And then my other like top pick I think was Wet Dog, because that one was just so sweet too. I think that's what ended up kind of making the difference for me with these stories, was like I appreciated the ones that had something like sweet to it along with the erotica, because I'm kind of like, if it didn't feel like the relationship was like fun or like, like I don't know. I think the ones that were like sweeter were the ones that I ended up appreciating more, because it felt like a fuller story was being told. Like the ones that were more just like a scene of people hooking up, I kind of like, okay, like that's fine. Like if the spice was nice, like cool. If the design was cool, like whatever. But story wise, like there were a couple that had like a fuller story going on, and those I liked a lot more. Even Rivals was just like like these like repeated scenes kind of happening, but it had this like much bigger story going on, and it also had this like very kind of huge epic, like, oh my god, like warrior story. So that one was probably like my third favorite. So I think it would probably be like story wise, it'd be like Wet Dog, Pinch of Rosemary, and then Rivals. Because it's like, it just felt like there was a lot more happening behind the scenes. Like I could have seen this becoming a larger story and like continuing on. So I think those were like my top picks.
I think, like, I feel like Wet Dog would be like a mini series that I would absolutely watch. You know what I mean? Where you just have like this slow, yeah, like this slow burn. Like we always meet at the dog park and we're like awkward, and then like the kid is helping them out. Like,
oh my god, reading dating profile like while they're there, being like, so I see that you
Totally
like.
wouldn't watch this dating show though. Like kids setting up their parents who are older, who maybe their spouses died or who they just hadn't, aren't in a relationship right now. Like, wouldn't you watch that dating show? And like the dates are always in dog parks or something. Like that'd be so cute.
yeah, I thought that one was just it felt like such a grounded story, like just so real and like whimsical, but like just in a super like realistic way. And yeah, that was definitely the only reason I went with The Chore as my top one, because I rated Wet Dog also 5 stars for the story and the art, but ultimately I liked the sex scenes in The Chore better. Just like me personally, I hate shower sex. So it's just like, sorry, it's like that's never gonna do it for me. So honestly, that's the only thing that like brought it down, So, The Chore ended up winning.
I'm right there with you. I was like,
I already don't like fluids, and now you're gonna put the fluids in fluids.
Yeah. But however, I will say that I do like that the character was like, they were like, I really like the feeling of the water all over me. So it was part of their, it was part of their thing. Like it wasn't
for them.
Yeah, it worked for them.
I'm just like, why would you get yourself wetter than you absolutely
have? That's you guys are of two minds. Oh, sorry, of separate minds of this. But in the story, they really enjoyed the feeling of water. And I do like
shower sex either. I thought the sex in The Chore was better, but I thought that the overall like depth of story was just stronger for Wet Dog.
Yeah, I think that Wet Dog is a really strong story, but I also think that it has the best. I think it has the best of everything. I think it's actually the best story in the anthology, and it wasn't my favorite, but I do think it's the best story because I think it has like a diversity. Like the characters look old, so that's one thing that like not all the stories have. Some of the characters, some of the artists, like they didn't do, at least in my opinion, a great job in just like making the characters look older. They do some of them look young with like a couple of lines and like changing their hair. And I'm like, this guy looks 20. What are you talking about?
I will say though that like, I think we definitely have certain expectations of what we think old looks like. Because I feel like the closer I get, like I'm in my 30s, but I work with a lot of people who are in their like 50s and 60s, like at my work, and they range from looking like they're just a few years older than me, that to looking like they could be my parent. And it's wild to me, right? Like how all of our bodies age so differently. Yeah. And I do get what you're saying, that they look like what I imagine most people would look like at that age. But I do try to like not be like too judgy about that, because you know, like some bodies are just, especially like if you like super work out, then you know your muscles are not your body's not gonna be as like saggy, or like
but your
if you
balls
are,
will be saggy. Hey, I'm not gonna. I've
or
seen
like,
old
listen, I'm like
balls.
well aware that both of your skins are gonna look way better than
Mhm.
mine, because you are so much better about skincare than I am, and like you're so diligent about your moisturizers and your sunscreens, and like, so you know what I mean? It's like, oh, we'll see.
Cabinets of
Yeah,
products.
no,
that
I'm
keep
not. I do think that I get what you're saying,
Yeah.
but I do think that no, there weren't enough saggy balls in this. Like,
I guess
I
I wasn't looking at the genitals too closely.
I mean, I was. I
But yeah.
was. I'm not saying that the comic wasn't hot, but I do think that there's a difference between like balls on someone that's like in their early 30s and then like someone in their 60s. All bodies are different and all bodies, right?
Yeah,
But
I will say I have no knowledge of balls, so I
yeah,
will
but
refer to you.
balls, tits, thighs, ass, like those, like the way that your body looks, it does look it looks a little different. And I'm
Yeah.
gonna choose an example. I'm gonna say like in Romancing the Reverend, for example, the very first one, like
Mhm.
they are they're shown young and then they're showed like as they're older, and I'm like, okay, they look kind of the same. It's just a
I also
minor critique.
wondered at like what the benchmarks were. Like, how old did you have to be able to be in this
Right.
anthology?
Well, some of them were like May, December, where like one is young and the other one's much
You're
older.
right, but I was like, does 50 count? Or
Yeah.
does, you know what I mean? Because I feel like even between 50 and 60, like that's like a huge jump. And
Well, I
so
mean, we're all dead after 30, so.
but I was wondering that as I read through the stories, like what the like what were the instructions
Yeah.
given to
I don't
the
know.
writers. I do think, listen, I do think that our book club is going to be wildly famous when we're all like in our 60s and still doing romance book club.
Uh,
Yeah.
um,
We're gonna get our own talk show.
I mean, we'll see. We'll see.
Living the dream. God.
To finish up what I was saying about Wet Dog is that I do think that the characters look older. Their bodies, they're like fat bodies too. So I thought that that was. I'm not saying that all the characters needed to be fat. I just appreciated just how hot and intimate it was, despite all these things that I guess mainstream media would tell you is not, like fat body and old body. And it's not like it didn't have like big dicks in it. It's like this is what my body looks like now, and this is how I can achieve orgasm. This is how you can help me achieve orgasm, or this is how you can help me, feel the most pleasure or whatever. And I think that that story had it all. Like it had a good depiction of what I would want my sex life to look like or to be. Not the shower sex, not too dangerous. But everything else, like my body, it being different and maybe having like different sets of limitations, and just the way that I just go about getting off might not be the same as it will not be the same. And I think that Wet Dog like encompassed that. And it had a little bit of humor too. And with the daughter being like, yeah, there's only one bathroom. So if you don't mind finishing up your shower fuck session and letting me be.
Which is less cringy than the stuff you watch on TV where the child would be like, "Oh God, Jesus Christ," because that child was like trying to set them up and was like,
Yeah. So
"Yay, congrats!" But I have to pee, so like, get out of there.
Wet Dog was one of my favorites, but it wasn't my ultimate favorite. Rivals was absolutely my favorite story because I
And
found that
favorite.
because of course you know me, the more unhinged the better.
It's like these gods. Like it was very much like gods in
It was
Olympus battling across time and space.
it had humor, right? It had humor. It had trans bodies, like it had violence. There was
So
magic,
much violence.
and then it was hilarious. It was like, oh, do it again tomorrow. And you know me, the kind of the genres I enjoy.
It was like it felt like anime fanfic. Like I literally, my comment next to that story on the Canva slide was, I need some She-Ra erotic fanfic ASAP. Because now I really wanted that with what's her name? The like bad lady who like raises them and then like turns.
Oh, I forgot her name. I forgot
Okay, but
her
you know what I'm
name.
talking about. Like,
Yes.
yes, I want her to be one of them.
Yes. Yeah. I see that. So Rivals, I think it had a lot, like a good sexy factor. I think it was really queer. I love that. I love that shit. Like that unexpected, just like, okay, what's happening right now? And then it was funny. And the funny stories were really effective to me. And I think that all of them have a little bit of funny. You know, I think one of them just has like no humor. It's a very serious story. Everybody else has like a little bit of humor in it.
Wait,
Every other
they're
story.
all queer, right?
Almost all of them. No, not all of them. At least I mean I don't want to say like they're not all
Charming the
queer,
Witch.
but some of them are just
which was not.
Yeah. No, yeah, you're right. There were a couple,
Ron
but I
Taylor
think like
was-
majority of them were queer.
Yeah, the majority of them were queer, and there was two at least. I mean, I don't want to make assumptions, but
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Let me just say, by the way, because we were talking about like the representation of like aging and stuff. Andrea, my goal is to look like the lady from Behold Her. That's my goal. That's why I moisturize.
That story is hot. Well, not much of a story, but that was a hot one. That's one of my top favorites.
I gave the art in that 5 stars because it was beautiful.
That's my goals.
I gave it 5 stars for the art too. I was just like, what is the context of this? Like, I wanted to know, like, is it a second chance? I felt like it wasn't set up quite as well as I wanted it to, but like for sure, I gave the art 5 too.
Yeah, I didn't feel like I needed a lot of setup. Yeah, I didn't feel like I needed a lot of setup. This is kind of like, this is very much like, oh, this is just the smut and it's cool. But I also like, I loved it when in a story they were like, whoo, I'm gonna take a breather. I'm gonna need to, we'll take care of me later. I'm too tired or I'm sleepy. Like in A Pinch of Rosemary, they immediately just fall asleep, like on the couch, just like blanket over them. They're just like naked, sweaty. We're gonna sleep now because we're tired. And I'm like, can relate. So I guess on the flip side, then we've talked about all the ones that we really liked. Which ones do you feel like, you know, did it really do it for you? And why? What was it about the story that you were like, okay, this one's not gonna go on my top list or whatever?
So I had two stories that I gave 1 star across the board, like story, art, and spice. And that was Fiadina, oh, that's how you pronounce it, and Queen of Spades. And they were like one after the other too. So I was like, what is happening? Like, did we reach like that point in the book? But then it like immediately perked up with Charming the Witch, which was so funny. Yeah, they were just so for Fiadina, my comment was I skimmed a lot of this. I just like got lost in the story. There was like too much happening and I didn't know. I was always getting confused as to like which character was like who and like are we like in the past or are we in the present? There was just like a lot going on. That I think maybe if it had been like a longer format would have been fine, but it just was like compacted into this story and I thought it was just very convoluted and so it didn't let me really get into the story. And then Queen of Spades, I barely remember it. I wrote down that it was too short and not enough story, but I wouldn't even be able to tell you what that means because it really must have been that short because I remember nothing about it.
Yeah, Queen of Spades is one of those for me as well. I think the art was beautiful. I think it's actually one of like the cleanest.
Wait, I'm looking it up now.
The cleanest art, but there wasn't enough. Like there wasn't enough story, and there wasn't enough smut. Like she gets fingered in the hallway. That's it. And I'm like, wait.
Oh yeah. So I didn't know what was going on. And I did not like that art. It just would not like if I was in a store and I picked it up and flipped it up, I would have been like, not for me. And that's obviously like a super personal, subjective thing. But yeah, those were the two.
What about you, Tosh?
So honestly, similarly, because with Fiadina, again, my like hurdle with this was I was looking at it on my phone, and so I had a really hard time reading any of the content because it was so small and it was like very long. I didn't like the art style. It was just so much like stark use of color across like panes and panes and panes and panes. Like it just didn't feel very detailed to me. And I'm sure like there's plenty of people who will fully appreciate the design of it a lot. But for me, it just like the use of those colors, just like I wasn't into it. And I had no idea what was going on in the story. Like I can give you no summary of what happened at all because it was just so hard to follow that I gave up. I didn't even try to finish it. Like it would probably be really different if I tried to read it in like an actual print.
No, because I read it on my huge like desktop. Like it was bigger than it would have been on the book, and I was still confused.
Yes,
I don't think the size for that one in particular is what got to you.
Yeah, because it's also like with this kind of format, you kind of have to like strike a balance between the context and the story and like the execution of it all. And I think like for such a short medium, like I think it feels like that's the kind of story you have to tell in a full graphic novel versus a short that fits in an anthology. Like the tone of it was just completely different from all the other stories. And again, it just felt like I was completely lost. I didn't know what was going on. Like, so I unfortunately, I couldn't get into it. Queen of Spades, again, it was just kind of like meh. Mazel tov for the hookup culture that I guess the main characters achieved. It was just I'm like, why do you know each other? Why are you into this? This feels, your hands aren't clean. I don't trust this at all. So I like wasn't into that. I thought the art was kind of cool, but I wasn't super into it either. And then I actually wasn't really into the story of Charming the Witch either. Like just because I
just
thought
thought it was funny. It just made me laugh, and so I didn't rate it quite as low as the others.
I wasn't into it. I think just because it's like this dumb looking prince guy just like shows up, and to me it's like, why are you wasting your time with this guy? And then at the end, her being like, I did, she's right there. I actually do have her. I'm like, all right. So now you're just like, I know jokingly, but it's like, well, the old woman doesn't always have to be the witch. Like, what? Come on. So then that like twist at the end, I was like, well, I don't think that this is as funny as they thought it was going to be, at least just to me.
Yeah, the humor didn't work for you. It got a ha out of me. I went, ha!
Get out of here. He looks like a fucking 19-year-old. Get that guy. So that one just like wasn't as funny to me as I guess I thought it could have been. Those were like the three, I think, that just had the lowest like impact on me with regards to story. Oh, also, I wasn't super into Persistent Visions. I was like trying to understand what was going. I'm like, is this a ghost? I didn't understand if it was a ghost or not. And then at the end, the guy shows up, and I'm like, wait.
Yeah, you know what? I didn't mention that one because I rated the art kind of high, but I did give it 1 star for story, and I literally wrote, "Are these sexy hallucinations?"
Yeah, I was like,
that's how I took it. That's how I took it. But okay. Well,
but I was confused because then in the end the guy shows up. So
yeah,
I'm like,
that's what confused me too.
I thought, I was like, are you having a fantasy about someone you don't have a relationship with? And then the guy shows up and they do hug, and then I'm like,
I thought maybe it was like magic, like he was able to like send a sexy illusion of himself to his part. You know what I mean? Like, oh, te voy a visitar while I'm away, kind of. But I was confused. I gave that 1 for.
I had all those questions, and then it was like when it gets to the end and the character shows up, then it's like I had a vibe for a second of like, is this a much older dude having like fantasies about a super young looking guy?
It wasn't like a 1 star, but which one also was like, that like overtime one, mandatory overtime one
with the rope play.
Yeah, with the like I was into the rope play, but like I was confused as to like what was going on like in the actual story.
I think it was people who worked with each other and had like were into each other but hadn't said anything to each other because they work with each other, and then it was like revealed that the guy's into rope play, and then the other
Yeah,
characters in
I
hero
just
play too,
didn't,
and
yeah,
then it's
it
like, oh
wasn't,
hey, we're gonna do this together.
yeah, I wasn't like super into that one either. It was like 2 stars.
All right, my turn.
Your turn. Go for it.
So okay. I for the ones that honestly didn't do it for me, but I also have comments on the ones that you guys were talking about. So blah, 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 blah. The ones that honestly I didn't enjoy, and I want to say like I enjoyed all of them up to a certain point, but I wasn't like I was left cold. You know, I was like whatever. You know, was well Queen of Spades. Yes, that's one of them. I just didn't get enough of like the setup. You know, was she like a private detective? Was she like a spy? Oh, you know, the spy is being spied on, and it was
Oh,
just
I didn't even get that. I just thought they were
yeah,
two
because she was like,
different.
oh, she was watching me, like I was watching her, but
Yeah,
then
like in like a club. Like, oh, do you
yeah,
want?
I thought that I tried to give
I
it
see. You
something,
added, yes.
but it still didn't work for me. So Queen of Spades just didn't do anything. It was gone. It was very quick. It was like, oh, I thought this clip was going to be 20 minutes long, and it's just like 1 minute. I've been scammed. Um, the other story that I was just like, ugh, was William Mason and the Man on a Mission. That story made me tired. That was the
The
one with the
still working
musician.
rich guy.
I thought it was spicy
The
wise, art
yeah.
wise, it was fine. I truly was like, I don't care. Like I don't know what it was about the story that I was just like, okay. Turned the page and continued on with the rest of my life. Moving on to Rivals, which was for me was like I have arrived. Like I've been waiting this entire anthology for this kind of story, and it delivered. I knew that Fee Yadana was gonna be like a hard story to read. I was kind of like thinking like, okay, which stories like will Drea like? You know, as I'm reading, I'm like, oh, I bet she'll like this one. Um, but I knew that this was gonna be a tough one. I think that I also had a hard time like following the story. I had a hard time like stomaching the art. It's very graphic, like in a not in a not in a way that like caters to my personal taste. Like I am not like a big fan of like very hardcore graphic looking sex, you know, despite this being a an anthology, an erotic anthology, but there's like a line where there's just like I maybe not the biggest fan of like anal fisting. You know, maybe that's just me. But I did feel like, well, I didn't get it. However, and this is not to say that you guys should have done this, but I didn't want to give up on the story because I think precisely because it was such a serious tone. I don't think it necessarily fit in well with the rest of the stories here
I think
because
it was too political and religious.
it
Which,
was.
again, I think it could have been its own thing, but all the
Mhm.
other stories didn't bring in that kind of like real life.
Yeah, I did read it a couple of times, and ultimately, it wasn't my favorite, but it definitely wasn't the worst thing I've read. When I read it a couple of times, and I was able to kind of more or less like plot out what was happening, and the end was very impactful to me. Like I remember the first time I read it, I like paused and I was like, "Holy shit, what the fuck? What?" I blinked a couple of times and was like, "Wait a minute, okay, let's start over." And I just went back and I read it again. I read it a
Can
couple of times, and I think that um it's one of those things where like I get what was happening. I just don't think execution wise, it's
Mhm.
good. And it's one of those things that I wanted to discuss because a lot of times, especially when you're like some people who are queer are not out of the closet or like in a culture religion that doesn't allow them to be allow them to be like at their fullest potential. It's very sad. I think what it is just very sad, and it's very much like fuck.
I think it's just like
Very heavy, very heavy.
the other stories were such like a celebration of like the sex these people were having at this age. And then like this story is just like, here's my lifetime of not being able to enjoy the kinds of relationships I want. And that, you know what I mean? Like it was just like, it wasn't even just like sad in the moment. It was like, here's my lifetime of sadness. And like
Yeah.
I would definitely read like a graphic novel like that, but I think
Yeah.
it was like the odd one out in this collection.
I do think that it was sad, but I don't think it was like I think it's an important story to tell. I think
Yeah.
it's important because like I said, a lot of people don't come out until they're much older, and they're like, I'm done. I'm done. I've lived my entire life like denying myself who I actually am. And so now I want to like enjoy these things. And sometimes that means just like even with like mandatory overtime, I think it's like indulging in like kinky shit that you never would have tried before, because you're like, you feel like shame, like I shouldn't be doing this stuff. I only want to do like
this wig is giving me a headache now. So I'm
okay,
gonna
take it off. Take it off.
I'm sorry.
Thank you for holding out for so long. Appreciate you. But yeah, those I did want to talk about at least those two that kind of got brought up, because I agree it wasn't the easiest read. I didn't want to give up on it because I'm like, oh, okay, this one's a sad one, but it's kind of important. And then Persistent Visions, it was all right. It was okay. I didn't understand what was happening. I kind of attributed to like magical realism or whatever. Like it has happened to me where I've had like a flash of like pleasure imagining like my lover, or like imagining things that I have done with like partners in the past. Like I've definitely experienced like intense things sometimes, like waking up like in like a dream about that. But yeah, I don't think
I think the confusing thing about this one though was that it'd be like, oh, I'm gonna work on my art over here, and then it's like, ooh, you're behind me right now. So it was like, you know what I mean? I think if it had just been him in bed, it would have been like a different vibe.
Yeah.
But I was like, this.
Yeah, I just was like, oh, there's like some magical realism happening here. Just go with it. Let's see, what other questions do I have here? What did you want to see more of? Like, if you could add one more story, like if you want to take out the one that you didn't like and you want to add a story of your own, what that story definitely have? Like, did you have any story ideas as you were reading this as well? Did that come into your mind?
An elderly horse ranch owner.
Horse.
like the horse whisperer, like the female version of Robert Redford. That's
oh my god, the horse whisperer, but they actually get together.
Yeah, and like she's not young. It's just like anyway, like two grandmas. One owns the ranch. Yes. Why were there no horses?
So no more horses. Something about a horse. Got it.
Or just like I feel like these were all very with the exception of the Rivals one, I think these were all like very inside stories. Like where's my farmer? Where's my ranch hand? Where's my park ranger? Like where are these ladies like working outside in the land? That I would have wanted more of that.
Gotcha. What about you, Tashai? Is there something that you felt like you wanted more of, or did you get any ideas as you were reading or whatever?
I don't think that I got any ideas necessarily. I think there's a lot of stories that would be fun to see, like especially just because we played the Brindlewood game, would be seeing like someone who's like maybe in the theater or participates in like theatrics and performance or something, and maybe like presents themselves like much younger on a stage or on a screen, and then you see when they get home and they take off all the makeup and they take off the wigs and they like come home to a partner and are like accepted for what they look like. Because we were commenting on I guess like Hollywood's expectation of what age looks like when you get older, and it's like yeah, I have a lot of products here just because I like fear aging as like an idea of mortality. But as like a current thing, like I have people commenting all the time on like looking younger than I am. And so it's like I wonder about stories about people who that stops being a thing, like once that stops, like what does that feel like? And I think those are stories that are also worth telling, like the transition into aging. And like I think just women or like female presenting individuals that like transition into what is considered age, like an older age. I think those are stories that I think are interesting and like could be something fun to read about with regards to like romance and sex, and also just like self-love when you reach that.
I get what you're saying. So like people who are like starting menopause or like starting to go gray. Right?
Yeah.
And so, like in that like
that reckoning of like, I am now in this like phase where I will no longer be able to pretend to be something or like get away
Pass
with
as a
something.
young person. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, once you start being perceived in this age group, I think that's like a really big change. And so I think not necessarily even like sex stories or romance stories. I think that is a conversation that's really interesting and really useful to like be having. And then the impact that has on someone's like perception and acceptance and participation in sex and sexuality and that kind of stuff. So again, very rambly answer that probably didn't answer your question, but
Oh, Tashai, I'm here for it. Write the story. I want to read it.
Write it. Some things that I kind of wanted to see more of. I feel like the body representation and the queer representation was on point. I would have like appreciated even like a disabled character, like somebody who didn't have like as much mobility. A lot of them are like, with the chore, don't you dare break my hip doing that. But I think that, you know, mobility is an issue in some people, and it would have been interesting to just kind of see that depicted. So my last question is like an introspective one. It says, what do you imagine or hope that your love life will look like when you're an elder queer? Like, is it gonna look like The Chore? Is it gonna look like something like that? Is it gonna look more like Wet Dog? Like, you know, what are you hoping for? I am hoping for, yeah, no, I'm definitely hoping for a Pinch of Rosemary type situation where like my neighbor comes over and like rails me. That's okay with me. That's okay with me. What? That's a serious answer. The way you're both looking at me.
No, I mean, I that was what I was expecting you to say.
Yeah. Or, you know, I'm not going to say like, oh, I develop magic powers and like have magic sex with my ultimate rival. That would be what I would actually want. But
okay, so I don't think
the ultimate version be that you meet yourself from a different timeline and you bang yourself.
That's also acceptable.
I don't think that mine would be like anything like any of these stories.
Mm-hmm.
But I do hope that by the time I am that age, I have written and published multiple romances. And so what happens is like people are imagining the romancing the Reverend story like with me. Like I'm their like author crush. They're like, oh my God, I wish like I was inserts themselves into like my story and it's like cut and paste my face. Like that's what I want people to be like, that author. Like that's my author crush. Like that's how I think it'll go.
That's cute. Technically, I think you're already people's like author crushes. I'm not gonna sit here and say that you're not. I haven't seen evidence of the contrary. Just saying. What about you, Tash? Do you have any hopes and dreams?
I think my main hope for the future is that I will be in a place, even in the near future, my hope for myself is to like get to a better place with like an understanding of like my body, what I want, like what I need for myself, like an appreciation for what my body's capable of, and also just like an evolution in what I'm capable of doing and like what brings me pleasure and what brings me joy, and just like continuing to grow. And then as I grow, maybe like finally, you know, casting aside some of the hangups that were a result of the kind of like world we've grown up in. Like I would hope in the future no one grows up feeling as like uncomfortable in their bodies as like we've grown up, and are able to just like explore and experience just like romantic and friend love and like sexual love in ways that like bring them happiness. And as long as you're not hurting anybody, everyone can just like, you know, have a fun time.
Mm-hmm. Don't hurt yourself. Don't hurt anybody, but don't hurt yourself. I mean, just test your limits by all means.
Seconded.
But
Everything Tashai said.
yeah, that's a good hope and dream to have, and I hope that it happens for all of us. That just about wraps up our discussion. I don't have any more questions. I think that's a good place to leave this. Thank you so much, you guys, for like reading this with me, discussing it with me, doing like the PowerPoint, sorry, Canva presentation. Woo! Showing my age now. Save it on a floppy disk. Yeah. What else are you guys reading? What are you reading?
April is Poetry Month. So I am reading Content Warning Everything by Emezi, which is the first poetry collection by Emezi, who is one of my favorite authors of all time and is really, I mean, I know lots of people write across genres and audiences, but I haven't quite seen someone do it like they do, where they've like written an adult romance and two YAs and then some like literary fiction and then a memoir that's also like written in letters and then now a poetry collection. And it's like, wow, is there anything you cannot do?
Nice.
Also, I just finished this horse book and it was amazing.
Horse country.
Yeah, this is, I don't know if anybody else read horse books as a kid, but this is
forever my favorite horse girl, Andrea.
Yeah, and this is like Latina main character written by a Latina author who grew up in South America and moved to the US as an adult, which just brings a different perspective, you know?
I started this one yesterday. Black Love Matters. Real talk on romance being seen and happily ever afters. And it's about Black representation in books, publishing, period. It's excellent. It's very good. I've only got a little bit into it, but the first 3 essays that I've written, including the introduction was so good. Like, when does that even happen? When an introduction to a book is good and you don't skip right over it? So I made sure to read it. And then I picked this one up yesterday, Silk and Steel. And this is a queer speculative adventure anthology. Because I read within my tastes quite often.
I'm still working my way through the When Panic Attacks book. I think I got to like chapter 5. I told Chris the other day, because she checked in when I landed after my flights got canceled, and like I was able to kind of use some of the stuff from the book to like stop myself from having an anxiety attack. So already the book is like helping me quite a bit with like trying to snap myself out of like magical thinking and being like, I'm gonna die on this airplane because all these terrible things keep happening. From the library, I borrowed Furyborn. I'm about 37% done with Furyborn, which I like bookmarked to read. Like I ran out of holds, and so I just started going through books that I had tagged. So I started reading it as like I like tagged this to read it. Like, let me just start reading it because it's like a fantasy. It took me a while to get into it because I had no context as to what the book was. I just started reading it and I was like, what is this? But now I am understanding what the point of the book is because I stupidly also just didn't read a summary before I started reading it.
Well, that is our hangout discussing Smut, Peddler, Silver. I hope that you enjoyed our thoughts and our feelings and all the things that came up while we were reading this. And I hope that if this sounds like something you'd be into, I hope that you pick it up and get some Silver Fox action in your life. We will get back together later for we're gonna cocoon back into youth for the young adult social media adventure. Is it an adventure? I don't know. Dramedy? Social media dramedy.
All drama.
Yeah. Until then, bye.
Thank you for hanging out with us. You can support Only Lovers Book Club by dropping some change in our tip jar and buying some books with our bookshop link. You can find us on Instagram at Only Lovers Book Club, and from there, find our individual accounts and projects. Feel free to favorite or rate us if that's an option for you, but always make sure to like and subscribe and turn on your notifications so you never miss an episode.